Welcome to the NanoCap podcast. I'm your host, Will Tjernlund, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of NanoCap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of NanoCap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. In this week's episode, we have Dave Rosa, the president and CEO of NeuroOne Medical Technologies, stock ticker NMTC. NeuroOne is a medical technology company focused on surgical care options and outcomes for patients suffering from neurological disorders, initially targeting epilepsy. Dave, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background before you got started in NeuroOne and kind of running the ship there. I looked through your LinkedIn. You had an extensive background in just biotech in general. But kind of how did you graduate college, you get into biotech, and then you slowly made your way to NeuroOne? Or what's the story there?
Yeah, I'm getting so old that I don't even include my first couple of jobs out of college. So actually what I did was I graduated and went to work for Westinghouse Electric in a technical marketing role for products that are used by electric utility companies. And it was painful. First of all, I wasn't very good at it. And I had always had my heart in medical devices, although I didn't have a background in medical training. And what I did was, when I joined Westinghouse, I actually went to night school to get an MBA. And once I got my MBA, I actually just started knocking on doors at medical device companies. And as you mentioned, Stryker was actually the first one that offered me a role, and it was a sales role in the orthopedic industry. So that's how I got started. But my first job was designing power transformers that were used at utility companies. And hopefully all those units I designed are no longer in service.
And so tell me a little bit more about that. So you're designing transformers. Obviously, it sounds like it wasn't very fulfilling to you. You wanted to get kind of more in the bio space, even though you had more of just a business and engineering background. Were you just in like the business of you wanted to be able to just like help the customers directly, or what kind of led you towards more bio?
If you go back to high school, I took a lot of advanced classes in biology, and I actually liked it a lot. But I had no background in it, so I thought, okay, I'll just take the technical marketing route because, as you said, I had a degree in both engineering and business. And I love the people that I worked with, but it was not exciting at all to me. And, I think, if your heart's not in something, you're just not going to do as well as if it's something you're passionate about. And I kept telling myself, do what you love. And what you love was, the medical field. So, back then, really, especially for a company like Stryker, that was an emerging orthopedics company, they were really looking for people that had advanced degrees. And, at that time, it was like you had to have an MBA just as the price of admission to even be considered for a role like that. So, but my heart really, from the time I graduated high school, was in the medical field.
And it's easy to look back at it now, but did you realize then, like 1988, 1989, right, as you're getting into engineering and stuff, that like we're about to have all these big technological breakthroughs and you have to kind of decide which direction you want to go in? Or is this still too early, pre-internet, Silicon Valley wasn't even in anyone's brain yet? Was it too early for all that stuff? Or kind of where was your mindset at that time?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I was actually interested in two areas in the medical field. And if you look at all the things I've been involved with career-wise, it's been in market segments that I've either had a friend, family member, or myself impacted by. So the two at the time were cardiology. I had a close relative that had died fairly young because of a heart condition, and then the other was orthopedics because I think when I was in my early 20s, I'd already had 7 or 8 surgeries, and it was all knees, shoulder, wrist. So it was an area of interest just because I had had so many orthopedic procedures at that time.
Well, just side note, were you an athlete or you just get beat up a lot?
I was an athlete that got beat up a lot.
Okay.
So my dad used to always tell me I was too reckless with sports. I would play any sport I could, although many I wasn't very good at. Some I was okay, but yeah, it was most of them at a young age were sports, and even at an older age, it was still one was caused, a serious one was caused from weightlifting. So it was an area I got into just because it was something different. And now I'm boxing, so we'll see what happens with that.
Okay, we're gonna fast forward like multiple decades to 2016. Tell me a little bit before we get into exactly what NeuroOne does. Tell me what it was like. What were you doing at the time? You get a call out of nowhere saying, "Hey, this headhunter says they're looking for a CEO. Would you be interested?" How did this all kind of come together?
Like most of these things do when you don't expect them. So I had actually considered retirement because going back to my history of surgeries, I had had a back surgery, developed a blood clot. Blood clot almost killed me.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, I had a cardiovascular background, but I was actually just recovering, and I had had some phone calls from people that were colleagues or recruiters as well, just proposing some ideas for new roles. But I really, at that point, wasn't even thinking about working again. And then a few guys who had kind of picked my brain years before that regarding a company they were running actually, found out I wasn't working, reached out to me, and I was on blood thinners at the time, and my short-term memory was clearly impacted by that. I didn't know that blood thinners could cause short-term memory loss. It is reversible, but I was really concerned that, gosh, what if this condition persists? And so I decided that I would do some consulting just to keep my mind active. And it was really a great idea. But at the time, I had no intention of taking a permanent role. So with respect to NeuroOne, I had a number of meetings, over the course of, I'm going to say close to a year. And the two co-founders had come to me at a handful of times and said, look, we'd really like you to run the company. At the time, it was like a concept, some ideas, but they didn't have funding. And to make a long story short, I was really feeling good as early as 3-4 months after, I had had this, this pulmonary embolism. And I decided that, I still wanted to do something. So I spent a lot of time trying to help the guys actually fundraise. And in that time frame, I actually got to meet with some of the doctors at the Mayo Clinic, as well as at the University of Wisconsin, which was one of the patent owners. And what I learned during those 6-9 months was that the technology really had greater potential than what the co-founders were initially targeting. And after I was done with the diligence, I thought, this is actually, pretty exciting technology that, could potentially fit in a lot of different categories. So, and it was something different because I had spent pretty much my entire senior management career in the cardiovascular field. So the neuro field really seemed to me like the cardiovascular field was 20 years before that. It was still relatively immature and really still is, and just had a lot of room for growth. And my mom passed away also from Alzheimer's, a neurological condition. I was also interested in trying to get involved in field that could benefit that.
So I've hinted at it, and we've kind of teased it a little bit. Can you just tell me in your own words, what does NeuroOne Medical do?
So we make electrodes that can perform multiple functions, so diagnostic functions as well as therapeutic functions, all using the same device. And when I got into the company, my diligence in the space, I actually learned that patients with some of these neurological conditions would have to go through multiple surgeries, multiple hospitalizations, because the devices were either only diagnostic or therapeutic. And it's actually been one of the issues in the space. If you're a patient, say, for example, and you have epilepsy, and the doctor says to you, you're going to come in for this surgery for us to just identify where the problem area is, and then you're going to have to come back a few months later for a follow-up surgery. It's patients are not, first of all, not excited to find out that there's going to be devices placed into their brain. So that's number one. And then to hear that it might require multiple surgeries and visits, they really just try to get by with medication. So one of the things that we as a company really tried to do was develop a technology that could do everything using the same device. So that's so far what we've been able to accomplish. The other thing is, in addition to diagnostics and therapeutics, we're also looking to develop devices that can deliver pharmacologic agents and monitor the performance of them. So that's what we do. We make electrodes, they stimulate, they ablate, and they locate where problematic tissue is in the brain and really can anywhere in the body.
Yeah, you mentioned the patients not being excited to come back for a second visit. I was watching one of your presentations. You had a photo of one of your competitors / the previous technology. And yeah, like, not to be hyperbolic, but it literally looks like the person's head exploded. And so you all being a little less invasive, I'm sure patients are a little happier to hear that it might be your NeuroOne product instead.
Well, that's, excuse me, that's actually one of the beauties of the device. If you look at one of our films versus a competitor's, it's much, much thinner. It's about as thin as a piece of paper. So you can place it with smaller holes, or even in some cases, like we're developing a technology for back pain. You can take this electrode, roll it up into a tiny tube, and place it right through a needle so that you can stimulate a broader area, but you don't need an incision to place the device.
That's very cool. So bring me into the war room where you're strategizing exactly how you're going to go to market, where you have a product that can help people in so many different ways, but at the same time, they're all going to need different approval processes. And then do you go after the one that's going to try to help the most people? Do you do the one that you think is going to be the easiest approval process just so you can help people the fastest? Do you go after the one that's most lucrative because it's the people most likely who need a solution more than anything and they'll pay anything for it? Or is it this giant Venn diagram of the three where you're trying to see where it kind of fits in the middle? How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, it's an excellent, question. So back when I joined the company in my diligence process, what I saw were a number of companies that tried to enter this space with a goal of kind of hitting the biggest market, coming out of the gates and hiring their own sales force to compete against some of the larger medical device companies like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and Abbott. And that's not an easy thing to do. And there were a number of those companies that raised $200-300 million that either that they were not able to successfully raise money because of all the money they had raised, or they were spending so much money that they were unable to raise additional money. And with these markets, as I said earlier, that are still, I think, underpenetrated, these technologies are still underutilized, it's hard to get to a situation where the company's at a break-even point and doesn't need to raise additional capital. So that was a huge concern for me. And instead of going after, the biggest, most lucrative market, I went after the one that we had the most expertise in, and also the one that had the greatest network that the company had of experts, which is what led us to work much more closely with the Mayo Clinic and the University of Wisconsin. So we went after epilepsy first. It's a smaller market, especially from a diagnostic standpoint. But I was very much of the mindset that I was going to walk before, I ran. And my goal was to develop the technology. The diagnostic is the easiest to develop, in my opinion. And then once we were able to commercialize the technology and start to generate some revenue to minimize the amount of money we would have to raise to fund the company, then, we could go to the next step, which was developing a device that could perform multiple functions. So that begged the question of, well, then what do you do for commercialization? And what really seemed to make sense to me was there was a company, Zimmer Biomet, that was the leading robotics manufacturer for these neurosurgical procedures. And they had probably no doubt the largest sales force in the space. So I really thought that potential partnership with them would minimize the cost that we had for commercialization, as well as allow us to generate some revenue and then also continue to develop the technology, which is what we eventually did.
And then with you being, like you mentioned, partnering with Mayo, being near Medtronic in the medical alley portion of the United States, how much is that in like Wisconsin and such, how much of that geography kind of lended itself to your roadmap with saying, hey, if this is what Mayo wants, Mayo is the top hospital in the world, we should probably do what they say. How much input do they have? Are they just providing funding? Or are they providing also in-kind funding through helping you with research? Or how do these partnerships kind of work?
Yeah, so they were an initial investor in the company. But I think, honestly, what was most valuable, at least from my perspective, was really the guidance that they gave us along the development of these technologies. If you don't have the expertise in a particular field and you don't know the history of why things failed or how they failed, it could take quite a long time and a lot of money to figure that out. And that also includes, the people that you hire. So I think the greatest benefit of working with them was really minimizing the mistakes that we likely would have made by providing guidance along the way. And, we've also been able to very quickly test our products. The Mayo has animal facilities. And since it's so close, the ability for us to just drive down there and get some of these devices in animals to ensure that they're performing the way we want is really invaluable. And medical alleys also a nice resource as well. Given that we were a public company, so a lot of our investors are different than the ones that that would probably pertain to most of the companies in medical alley, but they offer so many services and so much help for really any companies, whether it's regulatory, whether it's international relationships, again, to maybe do your first in man testing. So we're in a great area, geographical area, where not only do you have a lot of those support mechanisms in place, but you also have a large talent pool in the neuro space. So you mentioned the companies, but Medtronic has a large neuro business. Boston Scientific has one, as does Abbott. So it also allows us to be able to find talent that can be impactful very quickly just because of their background.
You mentioned going public and how things are a little bit different now. As looking through kind of your LinkedIn quote unquote resume, I haven't seen too much examples of you taking other companies public. So again, take me through the thought process of, hey, we need to raise funding. We should go public is the best route for us. How did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, so I'll just speak again from my own experience. I don't think you wake up and you're starting a company and say, hey, let's go public tomorrow. I mean, it sounds great, it sounds cool, but it's a lot of work. And when you're a small company, I mean, gosh, I spend a lot of my time talking to investors and watching the share price and so it's a distraction. So the thought process was this: I actually had an organization that was going to do a financing for me when I first started the company, and that organization got into a bit of a disagreement with FINRA, one of the government regulated agencies, and they couldn't come to an agreement. And FINRA, again, the regulatory agency, stripped this particular company of their broker dealer license. So they were not going to be able to do a financing for us. And, plan B was to take the company public. So I had some acquaintances through the years that I had met that had worked at investment banks. And we knew that we would be able to raise very quickly if we took the company public, a certain amount of dollars. And the reason why you might say, well, why didn't you wait and just go out and find another firm? The company, when I joined it, one of the issues was that the company was actually in breach of some of the requirements. Some of them were financial, some of them were technological. And I went back to both the Mayo Clinic and the University of Wisconsin and renegotiated the agreements. But in essence, I really had about 6 months to satisfy those requirements. And if I didn't, the company would have lost, the rights to the intellectual property. So I really had a short timeline, and I thought that was very risky. And I really thought this technology, had some great potential. So, I decided to go the public route.
It sounds crazy. Do you look back at that 6 months fondly at all, or you still have shell shock?
Fondly would not be the word that I would use. It wasn't, I wouldn't say that, taking the company public, because I had done it once before, was, something new. But it's, you go into it remembering what it was like, but then you get back into it and you say, gosh, it's tougher now than it was the last time. And I think everybody could say that about, trying to get a company to commercialization, from scratch. I think everything's tougher: financing, regulations, you name it. But the reason why I'm kind of laughing is that for about the first year and a half, I financed the company on a month-to-month basis, which is insane. And that is not something I would ever do again. But we were never late on the payroll. We had some really strong supporters that were the reason why we're still here. So, but I look back on that and say that was just crazy.
Well, especially when you were saying you were having like blood clot problems and trying to retire, and then all of a sudden you're like emptying your savings into like a medical patent. That's called conviction. We like that. So
agreed.
Back to NeuroOne as we kind of wrap up here. I don't want to make you expose your entire roadmap of all the different things that you want to do with it moving forward, the technology. But what are some like in-demand things that people are saying besides epilepsy that they're saying, hey, please start a trial with this, or hey, please look into this?
Yeah, so maybe to take a step back, as a company, what I'm trying to do now is really provide the clinician with a toolbox. So the toolbox in neurosurgery today, let's take epilepsy as an example. Today, doctors, neurosurgeons are using stimulation. They're putting devices in the brain to stimulate the brain for epilepsy. They're ablating tissue. That's our latest device that we launched, a combination device that finds the problem area in the brain and then ablates it. So they're using that. And I think, 5, maybe 10 years from now, what we're going to see are biotech companies with gene therapies, cell-based therapies, whereby you inject them directly into the brain in the area that is causing these issues as a third tool. So today we have devices that will perform ablations. We have devices in development that are far along that will deliver these gene therapies to the brain and monitor the efficacy of these therapies. And we also have a third technology, which does recording as well as stimulation. So that's the overall goal. And now where can you take those? What other areas? Pain, just the treatment of pain, whether it's back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, that I think is an area that has huge opportunities. There's even stimulation that's being used to control gastrointestinal issues. So stimulation is, I think, a big part of not only current treatments but future, and that's where we're looking to go. So the way to treat pain is you ablate the tissue, in essence, kill the tissue or stimulate the tissue, and we have an ablation technology that we plan on leveraging to ablate nerves in other areas of the body. That's facial pain is the next one for us. And then in terms of stimulation, we've made really great progress on a stimulation technology that can be rolled up into a tiny tube, inserted through a needle in the spine to provide stimulation in a broad area. So that's the other therapy to treat pain. But pain management, I think you're going to hear a lot more from us about pain management using ablation and stimulation, as well as drug delivery.
Yeah, and it seems, obviously, compared to the current opiate crisis we have going on, this seems a lot less addictive / habit forming, since you're actually solving it at the root, opposed to kind of just solving the symptom just as much. No, that's very, very interesting. So if the listeners want to hear a little bit more about NeuroOne, want to invest in NeuroOne, want to learn about your problems that you're solving and such like that, where should I send everyone? NMTC1.com.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
We have presentations on the site, and we also have video of a neurologist from the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, as well as one of the patients that was treated with our diagnostic and ablation device who had epilepsy, who was experiencing 10 seizures an evening and has not had a seizure since she's been treated, which is, I think, a little over 5 months ago. So it's obviously an outcome like that is pretty exciting for us. We're starting to see more of that. And if you want to hear more firsthand experience with the device, you'll also see that on our website.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for all the people you're helping, coming back out of retirement to literally leave a legacy, honestly, that may go on forever as more and more people get help. So thank you so much. And for those still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefor by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.